They sat me near the buffet. Not at a real table, but one of those makeshift ones with uneven legs and plastic folding chairs wedged between the dessert station and the swinging doors to the kitchen. I didn't ask why. I already knew. It was my father's 70th birthday. The great Dr. Henry Keene, Professor Emeritus of Political Ethics, keynote speaker at every retirement gala north of Boston, and the man who once told me, "You don't build a legacy with screens, you build it with policy." He sat at the head table, now smiling like he'd sculpted perfection from the womb. And in a way, maybe he had. My brother Nolan, the cardiac surgeon from Yale, had just finished a toast that included the phrase generational excellence. My sister Jenna, a tenured professor of constitutional law at Stanford, dabbed her eyes and held her wine like a practiced diplomat. The applause for them was warm, personal. The kind of applause you earn by following all the rules and being exactly what your parents expected. I reached for the salmon on my plate, slicing through it with a plastic knife that bent with each motion. The edges of the buffet tablecloth were starting to curl. That's when Nolan turned toward me, still holding his glass, and grinned. "Still coding in cafes?" he asked, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. A few guests chuckled. Before I could reply, Mom leaned over from table 3. Yes, even she had a better seat than I did, and said, "Well, we just hope your piggy bank is full, sweetheart. Retirement sneaks up faster when you're self-employed." Laughter again. Kind but cutting. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I knew something none of them did. The secure message had come in 20 minutes earlier, vibrating silently in the lining of my clutch. I'd read it between speeches just after the red velvet cake had arrived. The $2.6 billion deal between my company Cura and Athene Capital had officially closed. Partial equity sold, terms sealed, a black limo was already on its way. I didn't look back at Nolan or my mother. I just glanced down at my phone screen one last time. Final confirmation received. CEO en route. Private jet wheels up in 43 minutes. I tucked the phone away, folded my napkin into my lap, and took a sip of water. No champagne, not yet. My name is Mallory Keene. I'm 35 years old. I dropped out of MIT in my second year. I built a mental health app in my apartment after a panic attack left me unable to move for 3 hours. That app now supports over 30 million users. They still think I failed, and I let them, for now. The thing about being the creative one in a family of high achievers is that they love the novelty, but never the threat. When I was 10, I built a robot dog out of cardboard wire and an old doorbell. It could bark once, sort of, and shuffle its legs if you pressed the hidden button just right. I was proud of it. I remember dragging it into the dining room during Sunday dinner, placing it beside my father's chair and saying, "Look what I made." It reacts to voice now. Nolan was already 3 years into pre-med prep and had just dissected a pig's heart in a summer program. Jenna was rewriting Nancy Drew endings to be more legally plausible. Dad patted me on the head, chuckled, and said, "That's adorable, honey," before turning back to Nolan to ask about atrial fibrillation. That moment never really left me. Not because it hurt, at least not in the way pain usually announces itself, but because it confirmed something I had already suspected. I was the charming one, the quirky one, the let's see what she's up to now one. Not the serious one, not the future. My parents weren't cruel. They came to every school play, clapped at the end of every science fair. But their applause always sounded indulgent, as if they were humoring a phase. When I built my first game engine in high school, a text-based adventure with branching logic, they said it was cute. When I told them I wanted to study computer science, they smiled tightly and said, "Just have a backup." At dinner tonight, watching my siblings bask in their curated spotlight, I realized something that should have stung, but somehow didn't. They never saw me because they never had to. I wasn't a disappointment. I was a shadow. Easy to step over, easier to forget. They loved the version of me that didn't make them uncomfortable. I thought stirring ice in my untouched water glass. The version who kept her ambitions quiet. The version who didn't show up with press releases or TED Talks or valuation spreadsheets. The version who never asked for more than a folding chair and a smile. And maybe that's why I'd never told them. About Cura, about the nights I coded through migraines, about the trauma research, about the suicide prevention modules, about the 200-page contract I signed this morning. Because deep down, I knew that silence was the only version of me they ever clapped for. And tonight, I had brought that silence with me one last time, until the limo arrived. At some point between the salmon and the tiramisu, the conversation at my table drifted to me. Not directly, no one dared ask me anything outright, but in the way people talk around you, just loud enough to remind you where you stand. One of my cousins, Taylor, who now worked in investment strategy at a firm his dad probably funded, leaned toward the woman next to him and said, "Didn't Mallory used to have like a startup or something?" He squinted like I was a trivia question. "I think it was for yoga or mental health, or was it dogs?" The woman, maybe a new girlfriend from his revolving door of holiday dates, gave a bright laugh. Wait, didn't she drop out of MIT? My mom, overhearing from the next table, turned just slightly in her seat. She did. But we're very proud of how independent she is. She's always been the type to try new things. We just hope she lands somewhere stable eventually. She said it like a joke. A warm maternal chuckle at the end softened the blow. But the message was clear. I was still trying, still floating, still a question mark. Jenna appeared at my shoulder, then holding a half-empty champagne flute. "Mal," she said, her voice polished as always. "It's good to see you tonight. I know these big events aren't really your scene." I nodded once, setting down my fork. "They're fine." She tilted her head, giving me that lawyerly smile that says everything and nothing. "You've always been creative," she said, drawing out the last word like it had quotation marks around it. "I tell my students about you sometimes, that it's okay to take non-linear paths." "I didn't take a path," I said quietly. "I built one." She blinked. A flicker of something crossed her face. Pity, amusement, doubt. I leaned back in my chair. "Creativity scales, Jenna. You just didn't notice." She didn't respond right away, just gave another polished smile and said, "Well, you look great." Then she turned and floated back toward the main tables, her burgundy dress catching every chandelier. I watched her disappear into the orbit of applause and wine glasses. No one had asked what I'd been working on. No one had asked where I lived now. No one cared that I hadn't spoken about Cura because I'd been too busy signing contracts and restructuring global data agreements. But they would care. Soon. I slipped out through the side hallway near the restrooms past a tired coat rack and a vase of fake orchids that hadn't moved in a decade. The ballroom music faded behind me, still jazz standards, still applause, for someone who wasn't me. I pulled out my phone as I leaned against the wallpapered wall that smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and something older, less defined. The message had just come through. Encrypted. One of the few pings that still triggered a subtle tightness in my chest, not from fear, but from knowing the next 24 hours were about to reshape something big. "Your presence is requested. Jet departs in 47 minutes. CEO en route." I stared at the screen a few seconds longer than I needed to. Then I locked it and let the silence settle. Cura wasn't supposed to be anything more than a side project. Just a sketch of an idea built from the aftermath of a breakdown I had no language for at the time. I'd been 24, freshly humiliated by an investor who called me emotional overhead, and barely sleeping after being edged out of my own prototype by someone I'd once loved. I built the first version in silence, coded between panic attacks and freelance gigs, designed between therapy appointments and bookmarked journal articles on neuroplasticity. No big announcements, no press, just one update after another, one module at a time. At first, it was just a journaling tool with breathwork prompts. Then came the trauma response, tracking the sleep data API, the integration with clinical networks. And then the message from a veteran who said Cura stopped him from doing something permanent. That's when I knew it was real. I never told my family, not when it hit 100,000 downloads, not when the Department of Health approached us for a pilot partnership, not when the third insurance giant signed on and we were quietly added to federal employee benefit systems. Because the truth was, even if I had told them, they wouldn't have believed it. They'd ask for proof. They'd ask who else approved it. They'd want to know if I'd finally earned the right kind of degree to be trusted. So I let them believe I was still playing with apps. A door opened down the hall, and a server walked past with a tray of empty wine glasses, nodding politely. I smoothed my jumpsuit, checked my reflection in the glass of a vending machine, and tucked the phone back into my clutch. 42 minutes. That's how long I had left to sit through this party before Adrian Vale's limo pulled up out front. I wasn't going to say goodbye, but I would let them see me leave. The lights dimmed just as the final toast began. A jazz trio played a gentle rendition of Fly Me to the Moon, and someone at the head table tapped a fork to a glass. My father stood adjusting his tie, his voice warm and steady as he addressed a room still full of admiration for his carefully constructed legacy. And to all three of my children, he said, each remarkable in their own right. Nolan for healing hearts, Jenna for shaping minds, and Mallory. He glanced toward the back where I sat quietly with my hands folded in my lap, for always thinking differently. A few polite chuckles followed the kind people offer when they don't know what else to do. I nodded once. That was more than I usually got. Then, just as the applause started, it happened. The sound came first, an engine low and unmistakably smooth, pulling into the circular drive. It shouldn't have been audible over the music, but somehow it was. Then came the soft commotion near the glass double doors. Two servers paused, exchanged looks. The music faltered as a few heads turned. And then the doors opened. Not gently, not with ceremony, just a sharp click of swing and cold night air curling into the ballroom. The black limo glided to a stop at the curb. Clean, silent, glossy enough to catch the chandelier reflections like water. The rear passenger door opened, and a woman stepped out. Slate gray heels, navy coat, short platinum hair like brushed steel. No jewelry, no hesitation. Adrienne Vale, CEO of Athene Capital, had arrived. I didn't move. She walked straight through the crowd, not rushed, not smiling, just a presence cutting clean lines through decades of condescension. People instinctively parted. One of the cousins lowered his phone. Someone whispered, "Is that—" Adrienne stopped 3 feet from my chair. She looked directly at me. "Ma'am," she said, her voice steady, professional, and just loud enough for the room to hear. "Your jet is ready. We're wheels up in 35. My mother's hand froze mid-air over her glass. My father went pale, still standing, his lips slightly parted. A wine glass somewhere near the front shattered against the tile. No one moved to clean it up. I rose, slowly, clutch already in hand. I didn't look at Nolan, or Jenna, or anyone else. I just nodded to Adrienne. "Thank you," I said. And then I walked past the tables, past the flickering sconces, past the stunned silence of people who had only ever seen me as a seat filler with a nice smile and no substance. Out the doors. Into the night. Let them wonder. Let them replay every word they'd said in the past hour. They thought I was a ghost. Turns out I was the future. The doors shut behind me with a soft click, sealing off the ballroom, the years, the noise. Inside the limo, everything was quiet, but intentional dark leather seats, ambient lights that hummed low, a glass of sparkling water waiting on the center console. Adrienne sat across from me, tablet on her lap, expression unreadable, but not cold. She offered a nod, the kind that meant respect without needing explanation. We pulled away from the club slowly, the tires whispering over the stone driveway. I didn't look back. The phone started vibrating before we cleared the gates. First came the texts. A flood of gray bubbles lighting up my screen. Nolan. "What the hell just happened? Cousin Taylor. Yo, was that you? That was insane. Jenna. First text, can you call me? Jenna. Second text. Please, Mom. Why didn't you tell us?" I stared at that one the longest. Not because it surprised me, but because it was exactly what I'd expected. Vague guilt wrapped in performative concern. As if she'd missed a birthday party, not 10 years of everything. Adrienne glanced up from her screen. "We can issue the founder announcement tonight if you want," she said evenly. "Press is already warming up. We control the narrative." I looked out the window. City lights blurred past in gold and gray. "Not yet," I said. She waited, then nodded once. "Understood." I turned my phone face down on the seat. The silence felt cleaner than any reply I could give. What was there to say? The last time I told them I had something real, a contract in hand, a beta test, live, early traction, they laughed. Nolan said, "Everyone's building apps now." Jenna said, "You know that's not real equity until it's diluted." My mother had patted my hand and asked if I needed to move back in. That was 5 years ago. So no, I didn't owe them a press release, I didn't owe them a monologue. Adrienne spoke again, softer this time. "You played that exactly right." The pause, the smile, the exit. Let them catch up to who you are now. I looked over at her and smiled just slightly. "They'll figure it out," I said. "Eventually, and if they didn't." Well, I hadn't built Cura for them anyway. 3 weeks after the limo, Nolan went on a podcast, some health tech roundtable for doctors pivoting into innovation. I wasn't listening. Someone sent me the clip. He was polished, relaxed, the way only people with nothing to lose usually are. "Mallory's brilliant," he said casually, like it was a fact he'd held close all along. "We used to talk ideas back when she was first sketching out the app. I guess I helped mentor the early framework a little, just nudged her in the right direction." I paused the video, closed the tab. Then came Jenna. She gave a quote to an alumni newsletter, Stanford Law's quarterly profile on women in leadership. "My sister has always had potential," she'd said. "It just took the right moment for it to land." I'm proud I always encouraged her to take big swings. Big swings. They'd watched me swing blindfolded for years and never once offered a rope. So I opened the folder. Not out of anger, at least not the loud kind. Just clarity. The same way you finally clean out a drawer after pretending not to notice the mess. I uploaded a single Medium post. No title like "The Truth," no dramatic overture, just this: I wasn't lost. I was just busy building. While you watched my silence, I was scaling it. The screenshots followed emails from the early angel investors' design iterations, the original code, timestamps from my GitHub repo, a voice memo from a mentor in my second accelerator who said, "You're doing this with zero support and still moving faster than funded teams." I included one email from Nolan, short, dismissive. "Apps like this only last if you have someone credible fronting it. You're not clinical Mal." And a message Jenna once sent me the night before my first big pitch: "You should wait. Don't present something half-baked. It reflects on all of us." By morning, it was trending on Twitter. By evening, built-in silence was a thread of other women telling their own stories. Someone DM'd me, "You just gave us a blueprint for being underestimated and showing up anyway." I didn't reply. I didn't retweet it. I just closed the tab and went back to work. Let them try to rewrite it now. I had the receipts. The building used to be a shuttered library. Now it hums with quiet focus keyboards tapping soft whirs from 3D printers, the occasional burst of laughter when a line of code finally works. There's no plaque out front, no glossy photo in the local paper. Just a small sign above the door that reads "The Harbor." I funded it quietly through a nonprofit shell that kept my name off the paperwork. It wasn't for recognition. It was for the girls who kept getting told their ideas were cute, their ambitions unstable, their paths uncertain. I knew that terrain better than I wanted to. I visit sometimes, never for long. I walk the halls, watch them huddled around borrowed laptops, building prototypes with names like Bloom Echo and PulseLink. I never correct them when they don't recognize me. One Saturday, as I stood near the back of the room, a girl maybe 14 with thick braids and a NASA hoodie looked up from her screen. She squinted, leaned toward her friend, and whispered something. Then she stood and walked over. "I heard about you," she said, not nervously, just curious. "You're the jet lady, right?" I paused, then smiled. Something like that. She grinned. "I thought so." Then she pointed to her screen. "Want to see what we're building?" I did. For the next hour, I listened as she explained how her team was developing a peer-to-peer mental health check-in app for teens who didn't trust their school counselors. Her logic was solid. Her design thinking was sharp. She didn't know that 10 years ago, I wrote the first line of code for Cura in a tiny basement apartment, convinced no one would ever care. When I left that day, I didn't say goodbye, just nodded and slipped out the back, letting the sound of young ambition carry behind me like music you don't need to conduct. No applause followed, but as I walked to my car, I thought about that girl, her steady voice, the way she didn't ask for permission to build. And I realized that was enough. You don't need applause to leave a mark, just the courage to keep showing up,